Good afternoon. Welcome to Daily Maintenance. Today is Wednesday, June 18th, 2014. Coming to you from Northwest Arkansas today. Beautiful day out here. It's a little warm, a little humid, and a little windy, but overall, the skies are mostly sunny, and I'm glad to be here, and it's a beautiful day the Lord has made. Well, today, our key verse will be out of the book of Romans, Romans 5:5, which it reads, "And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has given to us." Well, to begin with, let's go to a real short excerpt from J. Vernon McGee. He says, "The love of God is shed abroad in our hearts. Doesn't mean our love for God, it means God's love for us. And this is made real by the Holy Spirit who is given to us." Some good words to remember. Today, as we look at this verse from the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans, to speak of hope and love. After all, who doesn't desire hope and love? I think if you were to add the term peace to the above, hope and love, it may sound a little like the hippie movement of the late 60s and 70s. These were certainly wild times, and as a younger person, I remember well how so many claim to have embraced this form of hope and love. Sadly, so many of us during that time, what we really had going for us was merely a fool's paradise combined with embedded lust. I think if you were a younger person around those times, you would kind of know what I'm talking about. Let's examine a few of the commonly used words in this verse, very common words for us, by going back to their Greek origins. Sometimes it's good to examine the Greek origins just so we don't get kind of a false sense of what these words mean. They're very basic words. How about the word hope? It comes from elpis in the Greek, meaning anticipation or expectation with confidence. Recall in our key verse, "And hope does not disappoint." Well, that brings us to disappoint. What does disappoint mean in the original Greek? It comes from cat. How come that thing is there? Cat, I have some kind of a little funny thing that got in the way there, and I can't get rid of it. Cat achiscu. Chat escu. Oh boy. Anyway, we'll skip the pronunciation. It means no shame, no dis. It means no shame. It means disgrace, confound, dishonor. So to disappoint in the Greek is to confound or dishonor, no shame. So with this verse we read, "And hope does not disappoint." Well, and hope does not bring shame or dishonor or confound things. Heart. We think of heart in several contexts, kind of like love. We think of in several contexts. Heart, not meaning not the thing that beats in our chest, but heart. Out of the Greek here in this case, this comes from the word cardia, which I think is interesting because you think of cardio, but it comes from the word cardia, and what it means is the thoughts or feelings of the mind. Matthew Henry says, "It is sin that breeds the quarrel between us and God." So basic and so true. Let's look at the book of Jeremiah now, the prophet Jeremiah, verses 7 and 8 out of chapter 17, which read, "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, and whose trust is the Lord. For he will be like a tree planted by the water, that extends its roots by a stream, and will not fear when the heat comes, but its leaves will be green. And it will not be anxious in a year of drought, nor cease to yield fruit." Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, and whose trust is the Lord. Such great verses. Do you seek hope which doesn't disappoint? And whom do you trust? Let's look at Hebrews now, chapter 6, verse 19. "This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil. When we place your hope in God in all sincerity and honesty, and put all trust in the Lord, in humbleness before Him, He will grant to us an unconditional promise, the assurance of true hope, and not just a fool's paradise. So there's the difference. Putting your hope in God will assure you of true hope, and not just the fool's paradise we described above. From the Life Application Study Bible, it gives us another little insight into our key verse today. We feel both the presence of Christ and the pressure of sin. We enjoy the peace that comes from being made right with God, but we still face daily problems that often help us grow. Instead, we will learn to depend on the power available to us from Christ, who lives in us by the Holy Spirit. And again, that was by the Life Application Study Bible. Couple of verses here. First one out of 1 Corinthians 8:3. But if anyone loves God, he is known by Him. If anyone loves God, that person, he is known by capital H, Him, God. 1 John 4:19. We love because He first loved us. We love Him because He first loved us. J. Vernon McGee says, He loved us when we were unlovely. He is worth loving. He is worthy. The Lamb is worthy of all the love, of our devotion, and all of our service. It's true. He loved us when we were unlovely. We were pretty ugly, most of us, I suppose, before we realized that He loved us, and that's when our lives begin to change. Well, here's some real hope and a promise. Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God, to those who were called according to His purpose. Should be a familiar verse to most people, and if it's not, it's good to memorize it or at least be able to paraphrase it accurately. Romans 8:28, and we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who were called according to His purpose. From the preacher's commentary, there's a couple of pretty interesting paragraphs that I took from the commentary. The first one is, one of the chief criticisms of Christianity is that it promises pie in the sky when you die, but offers little for the present. That's just a chief criticism of Christianity by non-believers, okay? Some preachers who talk rather exclusively about the future as if they were encouraging their people to survive on the promise that they would soon be out of the unpleasantness of the present may have contributed to this misunderstanding. But anyone reading Paul would recognize that the criticism is totally without merit. Not only do believers rejoice in their position and their prospects, but they are encouraged to rejoice in their problems. Side note, that's just amazing. If to rejoice in our problems, we all have problems and things that come up and issues and things we don't like to deal with, and this problem and that problem, and it just goes on and on throughout our daily lives. But you know what? If we can learn to rejoice in God in all things, then I think we've grasped a major part of our relationship with God. Continuing on with this excerpt from the preacher's commentary. Far from advocating escapism, the gospel of Christ offers realistic truth for living in the midst of difficult situations with joy, even to the extent of appreciating the problems. Just so well said. I really appreciate that. Galatians 4:6 says, because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Again, the second paragraph I wanted to read from the preacher's commentary says, when the Spirit of God enters the life of the redeemed, He opens blind eyes to the wonder of divine love and shows the believer that from now on his life is destined to be governed by this love, and all circumstances will be related to a loving purpose. It is knowledge of the divine process and the loving purpose that equips believers for rejoicing in tribulations. Promise for hope. Ephesians 1:13 says, "In him you also, after listening to the messages of truth, the gospel of your salvation, having also believed, you were sealed in him with the Holy Spirit of promise." Well, let's conclude today with these verses from the Apostle Paul's letter to the church at Galatia. We'll look at Galatians 5:22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I'll leave you with that today, and God bless you today. Thank you for listening. We will be back possibly tomorrow evening. We'll see how tomorrow goes. God bless you.